So today I'm going to tell you guys about Halloween. What is Halloween? How does it start? What does it mean? Let me tell you. So if you want to find the origin of Halloween, you're going to have to go all the way back to the Iron Age and to the ancient Celtic people. So the ancient Celts came from Iceland, Scotland, the UK, and parts of Europe. Anyway, so they had a 3-day festival called Samhain on October 31st, and that's the origin of Halloween. So they had 4 festivals every year, one to celebrate each season change, but Samhain was the most important. Samhain means summer's end in Old Irish, and Samhain was to celebrate the end of harvest. They would also celebrate the dead, because on Samhain, not only was it the end of harvest, but it was also their new year. So they had a calendar, and the calendar was cut into 2 halves, the light half and the dark half. So on Samhain, October 31st, that was when the light half transitioned into the dark half of the year. So the light half of the year gave way to the dark half of the year, and on October 31st was like the in-between, if that makes sense. So on this day, they believed that the veil that separated the living and the dead was at its thinnest. Some even say that the veil was lifted on this day. So they believed that the spirits of the dead would walk the earth on this day. So on October 31st, at dusk in the evening, once all the campfires were extinguished, the Druids, who were the Celtic priests, would light a big bonfire in the middle of the camp. They would sacrifice animals and throw their bones into the bonfire, which is actually where the word bonfire originated. Bone fire. They would throw the bones into the fire, so it was a bonfire, a bonfire. And since it was the end of harvest festival, not only would they sacrifice animals, but they would sacrifice some of the crops that they harvested. Now they would do this as an offering to the dead spirits that were to be walking the earth on that day. They would also have a big feast, and they would even set the dead people spots on the table for them to eat with them. Some of the Celtic people also wore costumes made of animal skins, so that way they could try to fool the evil spirits that might be there to cause trouble into thinking they're animals instead of humans, so they wouldn't fuck with them. And this was the origin of costume wearing. Some people would also play pranks or tricks on the town. They would vandalize the town and they would do shit, and then they would blame the evil spirits. And that's where the trick from the trick or treat came from. Then Rome conquered the Celts in 43 CE. So Roman Catholicism forced the Celtic pagan religions and traditions to evolve by implementing them into Catholicism. It was easier to convert Celtic people into Christianity by implementing some of the pagan celebrations into the Catholic calendar. So they turned Samhain into All Souls Day or All Hallows Day. So all of the Samhain symbols, festivals, temples, and legends were Christianized. See, All Saints' Day was a Catholic holiday that celebrated all the saints, and it was held on May 13th. But when they did this and implemented the pagan beliefs and religions into their calendar, they moved All Saints' Day to November 1st. So All Hallows Day is on November 1st. And they implemented as many of Samhain's traditions and customs into All Saints' Day that they could. And then on November 2nd, they started a new holiday called All Souls Day, which implemented all the other customs and beliefs that they couldn't get into All Saints' Day into All Souls Day, if that makes sense. So November 2nd became All Souls Day, and it was made to absorb all the other elements of Samhain that All Saints' Day wasn't able to absorb. See, bonfires were still lit, but now they were lit for Christian heroes. So the ancient Celtic people used Samhain to celebrate their dead, and now it was used to celebrate the saints and the Christian martyrs. And instead of making animal sacrifices on the day of Samhain, instead they sent people to give offerings to the poor. Tricks and pranks continued, but instead of being blamed on the dead spirits that were walking the earth on Samhain, now they are blamed on the saints. So pretty much they made it boring, but don't worry, because when the Irish immigrants came in the 19th century, the 1800s, they bring it back. So before that, in America's early days of colonization, the Puritans who settled the 13 colonies, they were Puritans, which are Christians, Protestant, pretty much. They're against the Catholic Church. That's the reason that they even fled and came this way to settle America, is because they were running from the Catholics. They were fleeing persecution. They were refugees. But since they were against the Catholic Church, celebrating All Saints' Day and Halloween was banned. It was forbidden because it was considered too pagan for the colonizers. Then in the 1800s, due to the potato famine in Ireland, a lot of Irish immigrants started fleeing to America, refugees. This is where Billy the Kid's parents came from, by the way. Anyway, They came back and they bring the old Irish traditions of Halloween with them, such as the jack-o'-lantern. So the legend of the jack-o'-lantern goes, there was a guy named Stingy Jack, and he was both an excessive drunk and a brilliant con man. Well, he was so sick of a con man that he conned the devil into banning him from hell. So he thought he was smart, so that way he couldn't go to hell when he died, he could just go to heaven. But he forgot that he was such an excessive sinner that when he died, he was banned from heaven too. So now, he couldn't go to heaven or hell, and he was forced to be stuck in the middle. So he was cursed to stay in between heaven and hell, constantly wandering. He had a turnip that was carved, and it had an ember of hell in it, and he used that to light his way. And on All Hallows Eve, the Irish would carve turnips and put a candle in them and put them outside their house to protect themselves from Stingy Jack. And that's where the jack-o'-lantern came from. But when they came to the USA, they changed it to pumpkins because pumpkins were easier to carve. The Irish changed Halloween up a little bit. They made it better again. In keeping with the tradition of mischief, the kids would dress in costumes and run around playing tricks and pranks on people. They would also be given treats, such as money or fruit, for offering artistic talent, such as reciting poetry, singing a song, telling a joke, etc. I forgot to mention, in the 16th century, the Christians had this thing called souling. Now, this was the act of knocking on doors and asking for soul cakes in return for prayers. I don't even know what that means, but that's what it was. And they did this on All Hallows Evening, or All Hallows Eve, which later became Halloween. But the Irish turned it into dressing in costumes, running around and tricking people, pranking people, and offering artistic talent for rewards. So there's your tricks, there's your treats, there's where you get your jack-o'-lantern, the ghosts from when the veil was thinnest and they thought the spirits were walking the earth, so that's where the ghosts came into Halloween. There was also a certain incident that happened in England on November 5th, 1605. There was this dude named Guy Fawkes, and he was a Catholic, and he had some Catholic supporters with him, and there was a plot that they had to kill the Protestant King James I and all his parliament, and they're gonna blow him up with gunpowder. They failed, and this is known as the Gunpowder Plot. They actually made a mini-series on HBO called Gunpowder featuring Kit Harington, the guy that played Jon Snow. It's actually a good little series. It'll tell you what happened with that event. Well, like I said, it failed and Guy Fawkes was executed. So Christians in England started celebrating Guy Fawkes Day every November 5th. This was to celebrate their triumph over Catholicism in England. They would light bonfires and hang effigies of the Pope and other enemy figures. Then they would have their children put a Guy Fawkes effigy in a wheelbarrow and roll him around, going door to door begging for treats and money. And this was to shame Guy Fawkes, like to make him look like he was just a bum. So this was called Bonfire Night, and it's still celebrated in England today, while some of the elements of Bonfire Night were also incorporated into Halloween. So the person who gets the credit for making Halloween what it really is today would be a woman named Elizabeth Krebs. Now on the night of Halloween, kids would vandalize the town. They would mess it up. Now this lady was trying to stop that, so she threw a big old party one year so she could get all the kids there, but it didn't work. That was in 1912. Then in 1913 she did it again, and all the kids went, and it was a success. They had a band, they had a parade, they wore costumes, and they had costume contests. And in the end, the town wasn't vandalized. Well, when this was a success, the rest of America followed, and modern Halloween was born. And so that's how Halloween came to be what it is today. Well, I hope you learned something new. This is Tragedy. Thank you for watching. I'm out.